Out of all the Hex and Circle characters, the two that received the least changes are Fischl and Sucrose. Neither of them received any major reworks or buffs like the other members did, but they were the most relevant before the faction became a thing. Both are options to consider in Lunar Charged, and in Sucrose's case, the Lunar archetype as a whole, resulting from her ability to share large amounts of EM. Because of this, I wanted to use them in a team where they're both heavy contributors outside of the Lunar space. My desire to do so led me to a comp that I had known about for a long time, but never really touched, at least until now. That comp is known as Sukakumon. Back in the day, this was known as one of the more complicated rotations to learn due to how many swapping and tech this team made use of. So let's take a stroll down memory lane and see how much stronger this comp has become. One of the major techs this comp used is Globa Swirl. When Globa does its Fire Breath attack, it briefly applies Pyro to itself. This can be seen with Elemental Sight/Vision. I honestly remember that at some point in the game's history, Elemental Sight didn't actually show this interaction, so comment down below if you remember this as well, and if so, when it was actually changed. Anyways, this application allows Sucrose to swirl Pyro from Globa, lowering the Pyro resistance of any enemy hit with VV equipped on Sucrose. This tech is particularly useful in cases where an enemy is permanently infused with an element, such as Tulpa. Now, I can't do it in the Tulpa arena because the entire floor is water, so that means that Globa just gets infused with Hydro and then it doesn't actually allow you to swirl Pyro off Globa. So I did it in Milliastra Wonderland, and you can see the results here. It's pretty clear that you can actually swirl off Globa, and that will result in lower res for the enemy hit by the Globa Swirl. Timing is also relatively lenient. You want to cast Sucrose's skill once you see the exclamation mark appear above Globa's head. Briefly talk about the buffs this comp received. This team allows for Fischl to provide both attack and EM increases to the whole team, since you can activate both Overload and Electro Charged. Sucrose can also give additional damage bonus to all characters in the party, though it's a rather minute amount. Again, these two received the least changes in the overall Hexerei cast, and it shows with what buffs they received. Don't get me wrong, 45% attack and 180 EM is nice. It's just not as impactful as what some other Hexerei characters received. Putting the buffs aside, Sukakumon has one of the most complicated rotation patterns out of most comps I've played in the past. Seeing charts like this really puts it into perspective. Because of the rotation's complexity, I did have to practice a bit to get acclimated to the style. Now, there are a couple of variations on the Sukakumon rotation out there, some with Sucrose unfielding the most, and others with Kokomi unfielding the most. I decided to focus on one with Kokomi on-fielding since I thought it would be more valuable to get Vaporizers on Shelling's burst rather than getting continuous swirls with Sucrose. I think it also makes more sense in an AoE scenario to go with Sucrose on-field, but since everything I'm fighting is single target in Abyss, Kokomi on-fielding is just objectively better. For the rotation, I'm going with Fischl E, Kokomi E, Shenling E, Sucrose N1E, Shenling Q, Kokomi Q, then doing a couple of normal and charge attacks until Oz disappears, then activating Fischl Q, Shenling E again, Sucrose N1E to Globa Swirl, then going back to Kokomi where I normal/charge attack until Oz disappears again, then I can restart the entire rotation. It takes about 25-26 seconds. Swapping immediately from Shelling to Sucrose and doing an N1E gets a Globa Swirl if done quickly enough, which is nice timing overall. And yeah, the DPS isn't extremely high by today's standards, but it's plenty good enough to clear Abyss. To briefly go over builds, Fischl is on a 4-piece Golden Troop and Skyward Harp. Kokomi is on 4-piece Instructors and Prototype Amber. Shelling is on 4-piece Emblem and Catch. And finally, Sucrose is on 4-piece VV. I would have put Kokomi on 4-piece Ocean Hued Clam, but my pieces aren't really catered towards healing.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Yeah, I don't know either. This domain just gives me high CV pieces on the clam set for whatever reason. I don't know why. But yeah, so let's see how well this team actually does in Abyss. Alright, so let's start with some Abyss commentary here for this particular run. As you can see here, I'm just doing my standard rotation, getting the Globa Swirl, which is basically the main thing you need to do when it comes to Sukakumon so that you can get Res Shred on Shelling's Burst. There is a little bit of an issue with the mech here because Oz will cause it to stagger backwards in the opposite direction from, or in the direction of where Oz is firing from, so, you know. But we get through that, and now we're on the PMA. I do change the rotation slightly here because at this point, Oz wasn't off cooldown, so I started with Kokomi E first, and that's fine because there is some leeway with regards to that. Kokomi has a good few second window for which to activate her burst to where her skill stays up, so that's completely fine. And you know, just trying to do as much damage as possible here. You can see here I do have to adjust the rotation slightly because I started with burst on Kokomi in the previous rotation instead of starting with skill, and so now the rotation is like this. But it's okay because now this leads into the next phase much more easily, with Kokomi's E being flexible place to place. Globa Swirl again. One unfortunate aspect about this is that I can't get the swirl effect onto the PMA because, you know, I couldn't get Globa to swirl on the PMA when it's in its sort of stasis form, but that's okay. And we finished that. Now we got the Yumkasor, I don't know, man. Fat chipmunk. Anyway, I do get hit here in the beginning, unfortunately, which is a little bit bad, but I kind of make up for it by getting the Globa Chili onto Oz, which permanently increases the attack of Oz, or the duration of the skill. There is one thing you can do that's kind of neat with the Yumkasor, which is for the fruits it spawns. If you manage to apply Pyro or not Pyro, sorry, Cryo or Hydro, the damage each of the fruits does gets multiplied by the reaction effect. So 1.5 in the case of Hydro and 2 in the case of Cryo, which is nice. I think depending on the cards, I could have actually killed this in one rotation, or I guess 2 rotations to be specific, but unfortunately that's not how it works out because of how bulky they've made enemies. I know that, you know, probably last year or so, it could have actually killed in one rotation, but unfortunately, HP scale in the Abyss, it's kind of cringe. But spawns one more fruit, and we're able to take it out. Next is the Glacial Wolf, which is one of the newer bosses they released recently. I do mess up a little bit here, so 3 Pyro Swirls from Sucrose should actually destroy the Ancestral Wolf Spirit Cryo Ward, but because of, you know, Sucrose's burst getting infused with Hydro, it takes longer for me to actually break the Cryo Wolf's overall shield, which is a bit of a pain, but it's okay. Just reset things for the next rotation, you know? Cleanly dodge, nice. Glacial Wolf is actually not too bad. It only has the double slash attack pattern. It's not too hard to dodge, and the pattern that follows it isn't either, as long as you're out of the way of its jaws. So yeah. Now at this point, you know, you're just playing the game and just trying to do rotations as good as possible, which I am slightly failing at doing, but hey, you know, I'm getting all the Globa Swirls, so that's good enough for me, to be honest. It's good practice for when I actually had to do this for Stygian, because I know for a fact I'm going to have to do Globa Swirling for Stygian next cycle, so that's kind of why I want to do this. Anyway, you can see the Pyro Swirls here, much more effective against the Glacial Wolf. Yeah, that's it for the Abyss runs. And these are the builds I used. You know, you do need a lot of ER for shelling to work in this kind of team. And while Sucrose and Fischl didn't receive that many changes, it overall works as a comp like this, and it's pretty cool. If you're watching this video as it comes out, I'm currently streaming on YouTube, trying to explore a new area without a map. If you want, come down and hang out. Thank you for watching, and well, either see you on stream or see you next time.